Welcome to Direct Supply's Continuing Education webinar series. Direct Supply offers monthly webinars on a variety of topics throughout the year. The topic for today is Person-Centered Assessment for Persons with Dementia. My name is Natalie Ohlers, and I will be facilitating today's meeting. This webinar includes one nursing contact hour and one complimentary administrative CEU, approved by the NAB. If you have any questions during today's webinar, simply use the chat feature to submit your question. Send it to Robin, the host, and we will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the webinar. Disclaimer: please note the information contained in this presentation is intended to provide general information but not advice about certain regulations and initiatives. This is not intended as legal or other advice, and each situation may vary depending on particular facts and circumstances. You should not act upon this information without first consulting with qualified legal counsel. Today we are joined by Dr. Cameron Camp. Dr. Camp is an internationally known research scientist in the field of aging. He has been conducting applied and translation research in gerontology, dementia intervention, and cognitive intervention for over 30 years. He is co-holder of 2 patents developed in SBIR projects and has conducted research on interventions for persons with dementia and memory disorders for over 25 years. Dr. Camp has lectured on and trained the use of these interventions in Asia, Australia, Europe, and throughout North America. Dr. Camp recently served as president of Division 20, Adult Development and Aging, of the American Psychological Association, and has received the 2016 American Psychological Association Award for Distinguished Professional Contributions to Applied Research. And now please welcome Dr. Camp.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. We'll talk today about person-centered assessment for dementia. And on our first slide, you have contact information for myself and for our center, where I work, Center for Applied Research in Dementia. It'll also be on the last slide as well. So what is person-centered? What does this mean? The emphasis is on determining the capacities of the individual rather than the deficits. It's a determination of personal histories and preferences and social needs. And so the emphasis is on development of plans of care, including personalization of activity and social roles to be filled within a community. And so the emphasis is knowing the individual from the time they enter a community until the time they leave the community. It is about knowing who this person is. A critical feature of this approach is to begin to think differently about dementia, to think of dementia as a disability instead of a disease. In our culture at this time, it makes a difference if I stand in front of you and say, "Help me, I have a disease," versus "Help me, I have a disability." When we see people as having a disability, it becomes our imperative, our call to enable them to circumvent deficits. And so this is about determination of ways to circumvent deficits. It's about emphasis on including people into community. It's about the promotion of independence. And it's about preparing physical and social environments that work collaboratively to meet these goals. We have been developing an assessment system based on Montessori methods. Montessori methods have been used in educational settings around the world for over 100 years, but they're based on very key principles, values of respect, dignity, equality, rehabilitation techniques, again, the idea of looking at circumventing disability. And so we conducted a project in France in conjunction with Montpellier University and with Agide, a training company over there. We worked with 196 persons with dementia in 10 French nursing homes. And we developed this system based on some earlier research we'd conducted through grants from the National Institute on Aging. We also not only presented this assessment system, but also the mini mental status examination and the severe impairment battery, the short form. Persons were diagnosed with dementia through the use of the clinical dementia rating scale. And so for each activity, we looked at the amount of assistance necessary for a person to be able to complete it. Could they complete an activity with just verbal instruction? Could they complete an activity with demonstration? Could they complete an activity if they were given hand-over-hand assistance? And so the idea is for each activity and each element, how much can the person do independently? How much assistance is needed? So the idea behind the Montessori assessment system, which is, again, based on this person-centered approach, is to maximize engagement and chances of success. It's really interesting that the psychologists in France who were administering the MAS told us that many times after an assessment, these residents with dementia would thank them for the opportunity for taking part in these activities, ask if they could do it again sometime. This is a very different response than you often get from administration of standard assessment tools. And so this is an illustration that we're trying to turn assessment on its ear, 180 degrees of a flip. Again, as I said, we gave the mental status, mini mental status exam. The average score of these 196 residents was 11 on the MMSE, with, as you know, a range from 0 to 30, with 23 being or below being indicative of some element of dementia. And so you're looking at people, and we targeted this with moderate to more severe dementia. So we looked at, again, verbal instruction, step-by-step physical demonstration. We asked them, did you enjoy this? Would you like to do this again? We used Montessori principles such as inviting the person to take part. In our training, we never use the word can, we say would. Rather than saying, can you do this, would you do this? And so it changes from being a test of capability to giving the power to the person with dementia. It's an invitation. We offer choice. We slow down the pace. We want to move at the pace of the person with dementia. And each of the activities was designed so that it could be presented separately. So it's designed to be initially presented, all of these tasks in one session, but it can be broken up as well. And a key thing to think about when we do assessment is to think along the lines of what question do we want to answer. Vygotsky, Lev Semenovich Vygotsky, was a Russian developmentalist psychologist, and he said the way we study intelligence is stupid. We ask people to complete tasks with absolutely no assistance. And in the real world, you get assistance from a brother-in-law or from the web. You go to get a video from YouTube on how to turn off the check engine light on your Toyota. And so what he said was we should measure what a person can do with assistance. And so this is, again, what we're looking for in the MAS. What can a person with dementia, especially moderate to advanced dementia, what can they succeed at? What can they do if we provide the right assistance? What level of assistance do we need to provide to enable them to succeed and to demonstrate competence? So this system had a number of different tasks. One involved hand washing, and that's where you would take a hand square of cloth that you use to wash your hands. Reading a short story, in this case in France, it was about the discovery of champagne. In our prototype work here in the United States, we've used a short story on the invention of the cash register. Visual perception, depth perception, color recognition, the ability to look at different levels of contrast. We're looking at category sorting. emotion. Can a person distinguish between happy and not happy? Category sorting for something that's more complex, such as water versus land. Fine motor skills, gross motor skills, color matching, the ability to dress yourself, and the ability, in this case, to use an external aid such as a calendar. So here's a photo of the hand washing exercise. And basically, the person who is presenting this would say, we're going to ask you to take this and wash your hands. They would also do this, demonstrate that. And so what are we looking at here? If you're asking a person with dementia to be able to dress themselves in the morning rather than doing it for them, how much assistance do they need to be able to dress themselves? What kind of instruction? Step by step, can you just ask them the task and they can do it all themselves? Do you have to demonstrate first? Can the person imitate? So there's a lot of information being gained right away in the first task. This is part of the story about the invention of champagne. Now you'll notice that the print is large. It's sans serif. That means it's without the thin curly cues. As people get older, and especially as they develop dementia, it's harder to see thin lines, so we need to think very carefully about the font that's used. You also need to have high contrast between background and foreground, because contrast sensitivity is lost with advancing age. And so we put all of those ideas, all of those things to bear. At the very bottom, it says next reader. And so what happens is the person who is presenting the task reads the first page while the person with dementia follows along. Then the person with dementia reads the second page while the administrator follows along. So you're also looking at things like, can the person restrain themselves from reading when there's print in front of them? Can they take turns? This translates immediately into, can they be put into a reading and discussion group where these same procedures are used? One person reads a page out loud, everybody else follows along. So again, the principle is you want to be able to take the information from the assessment and immediately translate that into creating plans of care. I should also say that the first page of the reading activity has the title of the story, but each word of the title is in smaller and smaller print. And so you ask the person to read this out loud, and it quickly gives you an indication of what size print they can and can't read. Afterwards, questions are asked, such as, do you like to drink champagne? Do you enjoy it with family or with friends? So you're looking at the ability to answer questions, to talk about themselves, to give opinions. Again, all of this information feeds forward into creating plans of care. Here you're looking at color recognition and also contrast sensitivity. Which one of these is lightest? Which one of these is darkest? Which one of these is in front? So you're looking at depth perception. Here you're looking at happy and not happy. And so the idea is to be able to take photographs and to place them within that black square, to be able to categorize which of these is the picture of a happy person, which of these is the picture of a sad person. This also then gives us information about their ability to use what we call templates, which is the outline of an object that you can place it on. For example, if they're losing their dentures, can we create templates of dentures for them to put their dentures on when they're not in their mouth? Or their glasses, so that the template will always be kept in the same place and a person will know where their glasses are when they're not on their face. It would also be used, for example, for dining. So can you have a template of where the plate should go, where the knife, where the fork should go? So there's, again, information being generated here. Also, we know that the ability to recognize emotion is something that kicks in early in life, and it's one of the last things to leave in persons with dementia. They can recognize facial expressions, tones of voice, even if they don't understand the words that are being spoken to them. And so, once again, a Montessori approach has very nicely developmentally sequenced sets of activities from toddlers all the way through high school, and we can map on to where a person is developmentally in dementia and provide them with activity that matches their capability, going back to this resource. Here we have a category of water and land. And so you're looking at lake, you're looking at mountain, you're looking at the Atlantic Ocean, you're looking at Switzerland. So you can also look at the capacity to categorize in different levels of abstraction also that a person is capable of using, of dealing with. Here we have a transfer activity. And so the idea is to transfer the round balls with a scoop into the corresponding color, and then to put them back into the container there, the white container, using tweezers. So you're looking at the ability to use tools, you're looking at color matching, you're looking with the tweezers at pincer grip, at fine and gross motor skills. All of these should be able to be translated once again into the capacity to use, for instance, upper body range of motion voluntary, if you're talking about restorative nursing, to be able to feed yourself. And so once again, you're looking at what level of capacity does the person demonstrate, and how can we use this to translate into plans of care. Here we have what we call a dressing frame. It's a vest, and it can go white on black or black on white, depending on whether the button is on the woman's side or on the man's side. And so the idea is to be able to button the top of it, which I'll show you. There's the vest itself. At the top, you have Velcro. And so you're looking at the ability to use Velcro. Can you put the vest over yourself? Can you button the buttons? So you're looking at, again, some motor skills. You're looking at the ability to use different kinds of fasteners. You're looking at, again, how much assistance a person would need. This translates pretty cleanly into being able to dress yourself more independently as well. And here's that calendar that I think I'd mentioned before. We give people a one-day calendar like this. So this would be Monday, the 1st of January, 2015. And at the end of the assessment, the person who is giving the MAS says, I could use your help with something. Would you tell me, and hands them this, would you tell me what day today is so that I can write this down in my notes? We had something like 80 people who scored 0 on the MMSE, and around 75% of those could answer that question, and most did spontaneously when given this calendar. So the question is, as we said before, what is it that we wish to assess? Do we ask a question like, what day is today without any help, which is the first question of the mini mental status exam? Or do we see what a person is capable of doing when they're given assistance? You know, we've done research for years talking about the need to have single-day calendars because in memory care, because a full month's calendar can blow people away with too much information. If you have to have one, can you put a square around what day today is, so at least you give some kind of idea about where you are in this complex thing? And so we're looking at things like holding or using tools. We're looking at pincer grip. We're looking at being able to open and close, use buttons, use Velcros, use templates, upper body range of motion. Will people give objects back? So we ask them to help put the objects of the activities. Can they be put back into the containers? Can they turn pages for the readers? Can they put on clothing? Can they hear? Can they identify colors? Can they talk about themselves? Can they give opinions? Can they follow along if someone else is reading, like we said? Can they categorize? Can they make and explain their choices? Can they answer questions about themselves? So there's a lot of information that is made available. Let me give you an example of how this would be used. So there was a woman in her 90s who had been in a nursing home for several years over there. She had Alzheimer's disease, also was hemiplegic from the waist down on one side because of a stroke. She was described before the assessment as totally dependent on staff for activities of daily living, often repeating questions, giving repetitive questioning, and aggressive, agitated, and would sometimes get angry during exercises and try to hit people. She was on a number of medications, psychotropic medications, to treat her condition. So this is like a prototype resident in memory care. And I think anybody listening right now can easily imagine someone who fits that description. And someone who fits that description, the prognosis is usually not very good. Okay? And the expectations for change are not very high. And so she took the MAS in one session. She was engaged. She smiled. She asked if she could do more activities later. She manipulated the tools. And it was recommended that, one, she be given verbal instructions, but one step at a time. Under those circumstances, she could complete them. Two, it helped also if you gave a physical demonstration one step at a time. If you did, she could complete things. If you pointed to a line for her to read, she could read the entire page. And so, recommendations. First, to give an external aid for repetitive questioning. So what we often talk about is writing down the answer to a question that someone asks multiple times, keeping it in one location, making sure that the person can read it, and making sure also that the answer satisfies their needs, that having that answer calms them down. You put that information, you store it externally. And then when they ask the question, you say, you know, I think there's a message about that. We should check it out. And you take them to the location where the answer is. You've checked in advance that they can read it. You point to it and you say, what does this say? So notice that you don't read it for the person. Instead, you give them practice reading it for themselves. If the content's right, it calms them down, and you say, that's right. Whenever you want to know the answer to the question, we'll just come here. If they use a walker, you can attach it to the walker. If they're in a wheelchair, you can have it on the wheelchair. You can keep it in a purse. And so with repetition, if you use the same procedure each time, what happens is with practice, when the person's anxiety rises and they want the answer to the question, they go to this location, they pull out the external aid, and they answer it for themselves. You enable them to independently address their own anxiety, and you take staff out of the loop because they're not needed to do that. So that was the first recommendation. Also, to give her choices. Again, would you like to wear this blouse today or this blouse? Giving people choices gives them the sense of control, and in her case, it said she felt much calmer and happier when she was given choice. You know, why do people become agitated? Many times it's because, especially in memory care, they think that people are telling them what to do, and there's no sense of control. And so just a little thing like would you as opposed to can you. Would you like to wear this or this? Would you like to eat chicken or fish? Giving them that control can change the way they think about themselves, about staff. It changes lives. It was recommended that she join a reading group and that she join their weekly philosophy cafe. Imagine, if you will, a philosophy cafe that meets once a week and talks about different approaches to deciding if something is right or wrong. This is already there in their nursing home. We've been doing work in France for a long time. And so inviting her to join that because she can give opinions and she can talk. To assist, for her to assist the activity leader in group activities by having this woman read the directions or the instructions for the activity. To invite her to join a cooking club. And she also said she loves to knit, and she has the gross motor skills to do that, to give that back to her. And so think about that person now after that set of recommendations. What is the image that you have of her now? This is what happens when we focus on capability and possibility versus documenting deficits, which is what standard assessment procedures are designed to do. They're designed to enable people to fail so that you can give a diagnosis and stage them and treat the disease. Person-centered care focuses on the person and what the person's capable of doing. So I'll just briefly mention that we had good retest assessments, inter-rater reliabilities, the usual stuff when you're looking at psychometrics for assessments. Very good psychometric properties, good internal consistency for the MAS, good test-retest reliability, inter-rater reliability, good convergent validity and discriminant validity. So if you email me, I can get you copies of the article about this and the details. It's in press at the moment, accepted for publication, the journal Dementia. So that's being finalized as we speak. Only 2 residents refused to complete the MAS out of 196. And so, again, this is something that people enjoyed doing, which is very different for assessments. Average time to complete was around 49 minutes, most completed within 30 to 60. So it doesn't take long. Almost all of them completed it in one session. Many residents, as I said, thanked the administrator for letting them do it. Administrators, the people who are giving it, also had positive experiences. And I know neuropsychologists who really dread doing assessments sometimes using standard instruments because people become angry with them. And so imagine, if you will, being able to have this information at intake before a resident comes into a community. Another thing that is being done now in Europe and we're promoting here is that when family members are working with staff at intake, to create a poster that has photographs of things that are relevant to the resident. If they were a tennis player, pictures of tennis rackets, they love boats, whatever. And then to be able to have that poster in the person's room so that when any staff member goes into the room, they're able to have a conversation about things that are relevant to the individual resident. Again, person-centered. How can we front-load the capability to know the person, especially before they come into the community? So the results translate pretty readily into plans of care. They relate, as I mentioned a little earlier, to restorative nursing goals, upper body range of motion, the ability to communicate medical needs. And it also translates into social roles within the community, being able to be a co-leader of an activity group, being able to read the instructions for someone, being able to read to another resident who is vision impaired, for example. For this particular approach, there are a number of different categories that are useful to get at intake. We've developed this particular graph working with Alzheimer's Australia. So contacts, family, and health, looking at personal contact details, types of dementia that they have, impact on other health, support required, and as often as possible getting information from the person rather than from proxy. Biographical information, as we've talked about, what routines do they like? So what days do they like to take a shower? Or do they take showers in the morning or afternoon? I mean, little things, this is something Tepa Snow talks about. Do you shampoo your hair at the beginning of the shower or at the end of the shower? These are what make you you. Person-centered care is about honoring that. When a person's routines are honored, they're much more likely to feel at home. What achievements and roles did they have? What are their current interests? Sensory strengths, motor strengths, use of tools, ability to hold, to carry, manipulate. Social skills, can they talk? Can they participate in conversations? Can they give opinions? Can they make witty remarks? So could they be a person who reads jokes at an open mic comedy club for the memory care residents? Cognitive skills, can they follow instructions, categorize, use templates, as we've said, read aloud, count? So there's a lot of information that's very useful to get at intake, and this is a way of categorizing those. Again, looking at histories, this is just an example, and if you email me, we have another resource that's been developed recently that we can send you a copy of. It takes into account many of these things. Cooking, pets, cards, arts, crafts, decorating, history, spiritual, religious. Knowing the person I like to talk about, things that upset me, 3 things that make my day. If I could, I would. What are the dreams? What are the aspirations of a person in memory care? How can we honor those? This is about treating dementia through trying to provide a good quality of life. This is about living. I am most proud of. The roles in my life that are most important to me are. Now, it's interesting, I'm here in Milwaukee, and the state of Wisconsin, their Department of Health Services, has created a person-centered assessment for dementia. It's a very, very, very good tool, and I recommend it highly. The website for that, how to download the PDF, is on the second to last slide in this presentation, and we can get it to you. But I'll give you an example of some of the things they look at. There's a lot. So they look at the physical environment, sound level, visual cues, lighting, language used, and perceptions created. What words do you use? Again, can versus would, for example. Activities and types of activities. Problem-solving processes, medication use for behavioral symptoms, and as you know, there's the push to reduce the use of psychotropics. So how can we do that? Person-centered care is a way to do that. Team structure and roles. What are the roles of nursing, social work, CNAs, activity professionals, dietary, housekeeping, maintenance? Okay. What's interesting is that for each of these departments, one of the keys is know the stories of the person. Know who these people are. Know what the background is. And it doesn't matter whether you're in dietary or whether you're in maintenance or whether you're in nursing. You have to know the persons. Okay. And so it's a great tool, one that I recommend. And again, you can download this. One of the things, and here's the a set of contacts for you to be able to get information on. We've done a lot of work with Alzheimer's Australia Victoria. It's interesting that their tagline is "Fight to Alzheimer's, Save Australia." www.fightdementia.org, vicfightdementia.org, and so their whole approach is to be able to find ways to push back, to do something now, to be able to work with dementia by creating a better quality of life. And I guess the one thing that I would push for in terms of person-centered care and assessment that hasn't really been heavily emphasized is the creation of communities and resident-centered communities. It's one thing to be able to know the individual and to have a lot of individuals within a memory care residence. But it's another thing for them to be able to act in concert and for it to be viewed as their particular residence, to have what we call a resident-driven community. So, for example, who chooses the outings? Okay. Who decides what activities are going to be held that day? Who chooses what's going to be on the menu? How can we have residents be contributing to those particular decisions? How can we make them more of a participant in this process? And when that begins to happen, when residents begin to see themselves as persons and as members of a community who are expected to be able to be as independent as possible and to be able to help each other, to do things for each other, it changes the nature of the system. When staff members say things like, "Let me tell you what my residents were able to do today without me," then you know you're beginning to see a truly person-centered environment, a truly person-centered community. In many of these communities that we're developing now, for example, when a person comes into the community, their life story is already known. A group of residents greet the new resident, and they read a welcoming speech. They give a welcoming basket. The residents have created coupons, for example, in the basket that would give them free haircuts or a free gift at the gift shop. The person is introduced to a member of the welcoming committee who will be their buddy and who will accompany them to meals, especially in the first couple of weeks. And so the first breakfast, instead of a typical move-in's challenge to find where to eat and to sit down among strangers and to have the courage to eat that meal with no money and no credit card in your pocket. Instead, they're brought in by the buddy. They're sat down at a place that has a placemat that says "Welcome Home" in the name of the person. They're able to be introduced to other people. They're welcomed into the community. And so when we talk about person-centered assessment, we're talking about the capacity to learn who this person is, to understand their uniqueness, to be able to honor that, and most importantly, to enable them then from assessment to be able to join a community where they are honored again as a person and where they can contribute in their own unique way to that community. So the assessment is designed not to diagnose their disease and its stage, but to understand the individual and to enable their strengths to come forward and to enable them to be part of a larger community. It is the first step in creating a better way of life as treatment for dementia. So I think at this point, if it's all right, we'll open up for questions and we'll see where we're at.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Camp, for all of that valuable information. It is time, if you guys do have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A, and we have Dr. Camp here to answer any of those live. So first off, we have, is it true that regulated breathing produces better results with movement-related activities with dementia residents?
It's a good question. I do Tai Chi, and so I do regulated breathing with movement. I've seen Tai Chi used in dementia care itself. So from that perspective, I think it makes sense. Also, mindfulness has been used recently in persons with dementia. You're talking about controlling your breathing. You're talking about getting a better understanding of your body. It's used to deal with things like pain, for example. And not to make the pain go away, but to be able to tolerate it, to think of it differently, to be in the moment. So that's a long way of saying, yes, I think you're right. And there are many ways where that could play out, and more that are being discovered on a regular basis, especially in memory care. Another thing is just this way of thinking and doing things works beyond memory care. What's interesting is that many times we begin our work in, say, a CCRC in memory care residences, and then people in assisted living say, well, why can't we have this? Why can't we decide, what fruit is going to go into the water? Why can't we decide where we're going on outings? Why can't we decide who we'd like to invite for entertainment? And then it starts to spread over into independent living, because this is a way of living. This isn't about dementia per se. It is about the values of respect, dignity, and equality. It is about enabling people to have control over their lives. And who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want to be part of a community where you know your neighbors, where you can contribute, and where you have a reason to wake up in the morning? And if it works in memory care, it works everywhere.
Thank you for that. All right, so how big of a transition is this for staff and family members?
It's a different way of thinking. We tell administrators, prepared to commit to a year to push this. You can't just start it and then walk away from it, because it is truly a culture change. Okay? It is a different way of thinking. And what we also say is if you do nothing a year from now, a year still will have passed, and things will not have changed. And so what begins to happen pretty quickly is you begin to see some interesting changes, and they just build on each other. But you can't change an entire system overnight. You have to start small and then build from those successes. Also, when you start off with innovation, often you'll make mistakes and you'll learn from those. Maria Montessori said, I welcome my mistakes, and she meant that when you make mistakes and you use them as feedback to continue to grow, that's a good thing. So start small, keep building, find champions who will be able to become peer leaders, nurture those people. It requires administrative support and buy-in from the people in the trenches. It requires both of those to get culture change. And so there needs to be that commitment to this, to continue to try new things, to continue to give more independence to residents, to reward staff for allowing residents more time to dress themselves as opposed to hammering someone because they weren't on a strict schedule. But when this happens, you begin to see amazing changes take place. Things like huge drops in the use of psychotropic medications, drops in hypnotics, because oddly enough, when people are awake and active during the day, they sleep at night. You see drops in staff turnover and call-offs because it's a better job. When you empower staff to empower residents, you get this cascade of very good effects. And what we say is, if you can document that the principles of this approach and the values are being applied, then whatever measures you want to take, they're going to flow in good directions. And so we say commit to it for a year, but in a year you will have transformed in some very, very interesting ways and very good ones.
Excellent. Is the Eden alternative still a viable program?
We always support any approach that pushes and supports person-centered care. The Eden alternative has been out there for some time, and so they indeed emphasize person-centered care. So do we. I remember a debate between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton when he was first running for president, and he was asked, would Hillary Clinton make a good president? And he said, I believe she would. I think I would make a better one. I think the Eden alternative is a very good approach. I think a Montessori-inspired lifestyle is a bit more comprehensive. but both share the same values.
Excellent. How do you reconcile the person-centered philosophy with the everyday real problems, lack of staffing, not a lot of money, and tons of regulations?
Yeah, a couple of things. The first thing we say is we assume that there's going to be no new money available for this approach, that you want to be able to work with existing resources, existing staff, and existing residents. So we start with that assumption. It's about being able to use existing resources more effectively. Second, we do a lot of presentations for joint provider conferences where you have the surveyors and you have the providers in the same room. I'll give you an example. I was presenting at a neighboring state at their joint provider conference, and I said, if staff members train residents in memory care, in food preparation, using the same approach, the same regulations, and the same documentation that you would do to document that a staff member or a volunteer is capable of handling food. If you did that for residents and documented in that way, are there any surveyors out there who would slam a provider for residents handling food? No one raised their hand. There were surveyors throughout the room. And so the idea is, how can, once again, you work within existing budgets? How can you work within existing regulatory systems? The other thing is to talk to the surveyors, especially the supervisors of whoever comes through the resident door, and talk to them about what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. Everyone's supposedly working to give a better quality of life for the residents. And so rather than trying to assume that you're in a confrontational mode, try to see if you can work more collaboratively. But again, drill into the regulations and find out what exactly they say, and then work within those. So that's a long way of saying that this is being used in a wild variety of places with lots of different forms of regulatory oversight, and being used successfully under those circumstances.
Great. Do you routinely reassess using the MAS, or is it only redone when a significant change is observed?
It depends on the place. You could go either way with that. Certainly after a significant change, that would make a lot of sense. And it would depend on your staffing and your resources in terms of whether you would apply it, say, every 6 months or so. On the other hand, the good news is you're looking at about a 50-minute assessment that a person enjoys doing, and that ought to be able to be provided by a number of different staff from different departments. This has been designed specifically so that it's not something that only one particular discipline would be able to apply and interpret. So we've tried to make it as accessible as possible so it could be used multiple times.
All right. One last question. Is the use of a resident family, 2 or more residents, a good person-centered method? Something that is seen today in care environments, allowing residents to control decision-making throughout the day.
We love resident tours as a means of displaying truly person-centered care. And when that happens, the ideal resident tour for family members is for them to be introduced to residents, for example, who are members of the welcoming committee, so that they hear what will happen when their family member moves in. Ideally, you should have a resident touring committee who is able to show off the residents to family members. They should be able to see activity programming taking place. Once again, ideally, that is led by residents for residents. And a family member who takes that tour, that's the easiest marketing job in the world. because who wouldn't want a family member, to live there? And so tours are a great opportunity to display a person-centered approach and a great marketing tool at the same time. And when that happens, an interesting thing follows, and it's called waiting lists.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Camp. As a reminder, by attending this month's webinar, you guys will receive 1 nursing contact hour and 1 complimentary CEU, administrative CEU approved by the NAB. To receive your final certificate and contact hour credit, you must fill out the follow-up survey. I'll put the link in the chat area, and it will also be emailed to you within the next few days. Please note, if you are watching this as a group, you must each fill out the survey to receive your certificate. The survey is given to gain feedback on the webinar, but also confirm that you attended the session. You will have 1 week to complete the survey, and then you will receive your certificate of completion and credit within 2 weeks. And now, if anyone is interested in learning more about the Montessori-inspired lifestyle products for memory care that Direct Supply offers, please help me in welcoming our marketing manager, Dustin Teske.
Thanks, Natalie. As stated, my name is Dustin Teske. I'm happy to be here with you today and happy to be here with you, Dr. Camps. There's lots of great resources that are out there, many of which are available online and in our recent catalogs. I wanted to take some time and actually talk a little bit about 3 specific ones that kind of touch directly towards the Montessori-inspired lifestyle. The first is actually a very good resource. If you found today's discussion to be helpful and enlightening, to be honest, this was one of the first resources that really caught fire around our offices. It's a great book written by Dr. Camps on the same concepts as discussed today, versus other pieces of academia or case studies, white papers. This is really written more in a story format. It does cover cases that have been unlocked. Really takes that more detective-based approach to help really find the person within the Alzheimer's or memory care. So this is a great resource to use, first maybe for yourself to become a little bit more familiar. Secondly, as a great book to pass to friends, and then really to distribute amongst your staff. Along with that, to be a little bit more active, a little more engaging, I do very much enjoy this, A Different Visit. This is a great, helpful tool for us as staff members or activities directors or even your family members to really get the most out of this Montessori-inspired lifestyle. Really some helpful hints, a variety of different activities for a variety of different persons, really to orient on bringing the family member and the resident together. One of the ones that I really liked, if your grandfather, your father, or your friend was more of a carpenter, more of a handyman, there's the nice little activity called Nuts and Bolts, where you would take 3 bowls, 3 different colored bowls, and the one on the far left, the first bowl, you'll have your nuts. On the second bowl, you're going to have your bolts, and the third bowl is where you'd actually complete it. As a family member, just to kind of get things going, you might start to assemble and show, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. Put the finished bolt into the last bucket, and then as you're having a conversation, talking about familiar memories or things that they like to do with their hands, such as this, you're working through that activity, doing some hand-finger dexterity, as well as just creating a nice, engaging activity with that family member. Both of these tools, like I said, are great for staff members. What I would really recommend, though, as you think about the shift amongst your communities, doing something like this with the family members of the residents themselves. So maybe it's a part of their welcoming kit as their loved ones join your community, or maybe it's something that they can check out of your library. It's a really great way to continue to promote what you're doing, how your centered approach is different. It really becomes more about the who, what, why behind the individual and their specific disabilities with memory care.
Yeah, the first book is called Hiding the Stranger in the Mirror.
That's right. I should list the names of them.
The other is Different Visit. Hiding the Stranger in the Mirror is a detective training manual. It's designed to answer the question, why is this happening? Why is this person with dementia doing this? And then to tap that into, if they're doing it for this reason, here's the fix. If they're doing it for this reason, here's the fix. Right. So it gives you a formula to figure out why a person might be asking the same question over and over, why they may not want to leave their room, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and just to put some more credence behind that philosophy, After reading this book, it actually applied in my own life. On the opposite end of the spectrum with my children, there's still great philosophies. Why is he getting upset? What can I do? What can I change to help actually address the need versus what's going on in the activity? So just great resources. Along with that, there are different sorts of games and activities designed specifically to follow a Montessori-inspired lifestyle. This is actually Trevel. It's a word game. Comes with both food and U.S. presidents. So things that are familiar, things that are engaging, actually follows the very familiar format of bingo. So you're going to have 10 different 10 by 17 bingo cards, and they'll have a variety of 8 of 18 different names. As the bingo presenter actually plays along, so to speak, you're going to receive a visual cue along with some different questions to help create engagement. So fish and then to help the audience or to help our friends, family members, you might give some hints such as, when you think of fish and blank, which country usually comes in mind? The answer might be England. Right. Have anybody been to England? What was that like? Hopefully somewhere along the way we're getting the answers, and along with that, some people are winning in bingo, but we all win based on a conversation and engagement.
And the answer itself is on the other side, so if no one comes up with it, you can show them this and they can answer it. Then you can cover up the square with like a black piece of cardboard. So it's sort of like blackout in bingo. But the most important part of the activity is the discussion questions. For example, a popular New York restaurant is called Assault and Battery. It's famous for its fish and chips and also for deep-fried candy bars. What was the most unusual deep-fried food you've ever eaten? And so the idea is that it's not just about completing squares and winning a game. It's about enabling persons with dementia to think, to encounter new information, to share who they are, their experiences. For me, I've eaten a deep-fried Mars bar in Scotland, which was coated with batter, and they say it's one of those once-a-year things you should try, and no more than that. Hearing this, you know something about me, okay? And when you have a table full of people who are sharing their experiences, this is how you begin to create community. This is how you get people to learn about each other and to feel comfortable with each other. So yes, it's a game. Yes, you can give a prize to whoever fills out the squares first, but the focus is on enabling people to make decisions, to think, to share, and again, to create this sense of, I know these people and they know me.
So to kind of recap and go back, I agree, and I really appreciate you coming in for the time today. This is, again, one of those great resources. All these are available online, but just this place to start, this would be my guide, is to start here and then work backwards. Yeah. Start with a shift within yourself, see where that's going to develop, and then find other great tools and resources online at www.directsupply.net.
Where can we buy the bingo game?
You can actually find it at www.directsupply.net.
And what is it called?
It's called Trevel. And there's 2 different word games. There's Trevel for U.S. presidents and Trevel for food.
And more in the pipeline.
Even some more surprises.
That's always exciting. Well, thank you so much, Cameron and Dustin, for all that information. If you guys have any questions about the product, like Dustin said, please reach out to your Direct Supply account manager for more information about webinars. Or to view past webinars, please visit our www.directsupply.com/webinars. Once again, thank you guys for attending.